This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, Carla, I think you already turned on the recording. This is Stephanie Halleck, Chair of the Board of Agriculture, reconvening after the lunch break for our meeting on September 15th, 2021. And I believe we are going to have an update on the hemp program from Lauren Henderson, Sunny Summers, and Mike Odenthal. So Lauren, take it away.
Good afternoon, Chair Halleck and board members. It's nice to see you all. I'm like Director Taylor, disappointed we're not in person, but there's a good reason for that. But nonetheless, we're still together. We are here to provide kind of an overview update on hemp. I believe this came out of a previous board meeting of some interest with that, and frankly, this is good timing for that since it's on the heels of a very busy legislative session around cannabis in general. Carla, do you want to put up the presentation? And while Carla's doing that, it might be better if you could keep track of your questions and we do it at the end. We're going to cover quite a bit of ground and want to make sure that we have time for questions, and we can go back through the slide presentation if there are particular places that you would like. I think that would be better because I think you might, through Sunny and Mike, might fill in some of the gaps that folks may have, and I anticipate may even generate more questions. Believe it or not, I don't know everything. In fact, I know what feels like nothing in this space because it changes all the time. And Sunny and Mike and our whole team around this is critical to helping us get through this and answer the questions because it's changing all the time. So let's get started, and then looking forward to all the questions that I know you're going to have. I will just say, and Carla, you can go to the next slide. There is the legal framework which Oregon operates in now, which is a little bit different space in that hemp is legal federally through the Farm Bill, and then of course we have our state laws. And so we're constantly looking to make those two work together. And Sunny will talk later a little bit about the Farm Bill. But for our hemp program particularly, there's really three main components. And they all have responsibilities on either the growers or the handlers, whoever is licensed, in those that are really unique, I think, to this program, maybe more than our other programs. There's the whole registration process. There's the field work that our staff are doing and the compliance pieces. And then the enforcement pieces are very complex and difficult. So we'll talk a little bit about that. This is what we want to get done today. The enforcement piece, Operation Table Rock, is a focused enforcement operation that we have been involved in Southern Oregon, and Mike will talk about that. He's been actually located down there for quite a few weeks. And then Sunny will go through all of the legislative session, particularly House Bill 3000, which changed and increased our abilities for compliance and enforcement considerably. and also involved us working more closely with OLCC, which is a good thing, and then talk more about kind of where at the end, where I think we're headed. So next slide, Carla. There we go. So just as a really quick reminder, cannabis on the left side, that's the space that we're operating in. It's legal at the federal level through the Farm Bill. We have some work to get a state plan approved there. Sunny will talk about that. It's 0.3% THC or less. It's 0.3. Everybody gets and forgets the point. That decimal is very important. We do not have a specific tracking system other than through the registration process today, and where we know those fields are, and who is registering for that to either be a grower or handler. There are no acreage limits on the hemp side versus what OLCC is regulating on the marijuana side, which is legal at our state level through our state laws. It's above 0.3. OLCC has a very sophisticated and complicated seed to sale tracking system. They know, or should know, where everything is going at any given time in that plant's life. And then they have various tiers, with the largest outdoor tier being just shy of an acre. They register, and I think they have some various requirements for the indoor as well. So those are the two spaces we work in. I can tell you there's a big space in the middle that there isn't a line there, where we have folks that we know may be registering as hemp, but it really is marijuana. And then we have folks in the middle that we'll talk more about that are not trying to be legal in either space and become an illegal operation, and that involves a lot of law enforcement. So that is the legal space that we're operating in today. Next slide. This just gives you a really high-level overview of the life cycle of hemp in Oregon. And I'm a little color challenged, so if I get a color wrong, pardon me. Sunny says they're green, orange, and I think blue, so hopefully I got that right. You can see it starts with the grower registration for whatever they're growing for. We do have some that are growing for seed. And then that has to be pre-harvest tested. And there are specific requirements around that pre-harvest test. They have to do their pre-harvest test, I think it's no later than 28 days prior to harvest. That is a point of emphasis for us going forward. We've had a lot of folks skip this process, and we're not getting those test results from them. And so it leaves you to wonder why. Did they forget? Did they not know? Did they do it on purpose? Or did they have a crop failure that they knew was going to test above the limit and didn't want to tell anybody? So that is an area of challenge for us in making sure that everybody is adhering to that. We then have the harvest of that, and it goes to a handler and a processor who is also registered. And then from there, it gets turned into what you might think about as a finished product through the CBD oil seed, a smokable product. And then there's another testing mark there, which is a requirement. And then it will from there go to vape, edibles, lotions, more testing, and then to the retail. So that's just at a very high level, the process that hemp is going through in Oregon. Next slide. How did I do on my colors? Did I get them right? Hopefully I did. This is the stats for hemp in Oregon as of September. I will just caution you, as soon as you write this down, it will change. It's constantly changing, but this is where we're at as of September 6th. You can see we have about 752 growers, 392 handlers, and about 7,000 acres. That is less than last year. I think it's less by at least half. But I think the footprint is very similar. From what I know, the footprint of last year and the years before, you can see a lot in Southern Oregon, quite a bit up the I-5 corridor, quite a bit in Central Oregon, and then scattered throughout the states, clear off to the east side as far as you can go. I will mention this map has another purpose and why I put it in here. That is a big job for us, like all of our programs, to cover statewide, particularly with the resources we have. And we'll talk a little bit about that on the next slide. So next. So here's our current budget for the hemp program. This is considerably more than we had last biennium. It is other funds, $3,490,000. Those other funds are dependent on the license fees that you see below. We most likely, probably for sure, will have to reassess those fees in order to have this program continue to be sustainable. I'm saying that because we originally went into this budget period with 4 staff in this program, and we had a budget package of an additional 4. And then we added, which hardly ever happens through the legislative process, another 4 because there was recognition at the legislature we did not have enough staff. I can tell you today, with the focused work we're trying to do on the enforcement side, which you will hear Mike talk about, I still don't think we have enough staff to do all of the things that are expected with this today. So we will need to look at that. We are very grateful for the added staff, including having Mike as the full-time manager who is solely focused on that. As you heard from Deputy Director Hansen earlier on our budget, we would not be where we're at today without the good fortune or bad fortune, however you want to look at it, of our weed staff who, because of the lottery shortfall, we were faced with some hard decisions. And Deputy Director Hansen, who recognized that early on, realized that we could keep those core staff and their expertise in our agency without having to consider layoffs and maybe losing our weed program or the expertise that we have by switching them over to this program. And they have taken this program a very long ways in an area that we wouldn't be here because we just didn't have the staff. And so you can't thank them enough. So we're going to do that at every opportunity, but we are slowly working towards hiring new staff. We've hired and brought on, including Mike, 3 hemp staff, I believe it is 3 or 4 that are dedicated solely to the hemp program. We have another 4 to bring on that the legislature phased in January. I'm hoping we can bring on 1 or 2 of those staff early if we have the limitation and the cash to do that, which I believe we can. There will be a transition for weed staff continuing to work with our new hemp staff. You just don't throw them out there into this. And so I would anticipate that we will be doing that from now clear up until the first of the year so we can have a smooth transition. And that's gone very well, I think. Next slide. So with that, I'm going to, Sunny, you'll want to introduce yourself. Turn it over to Sunny. She has our expertise of the Farm Bill and the legislative session, and this is a really important part of the presentation. So go ahead, Sunny.
Thank you, Lauren. Good afternoon. My name is Sunny Summers. I'm the Cannabis Policy Coordinator for the department. And as Lauren said, we're going to discuss a little bit backwards looking at the 2 farm bills and then the 2021 session and what that means for the hemp program moving forward. So next slide. Some of you may be familiar with the 14 and 18 farm bills. Basically, the 2014 farm bill gave states the ability to create pilot programs for hemp, and ODA started issuing hemp registrations in 2015. It didn't create any federal program. It just said that these pilot programs could be operated at the state level. And we had a number of states participating, but not all of them. And then in 2018, the Farm Bill actually created a new definition of hemp. They were attempting to make it clear that things like CBD, which is extracted from the flowers of the plant, just like THC, however, CBD is not intoxicating. This new definition was intended to capture those kind of items and make it clear that they are considered hemp. It also created a federal program at the USDA. So they had a huge project ahead of them, and I give them a lot of credit. They were tasked with putting out rules very quickly. And if you remember, we had that month-long federal government shutdown. So they managed to get rules out by November of that year, draft interim rules. And then they made those rules final in March of this year. It gives states the opportunity to submit plans to the USDA for approval. This is going to be a delegated authority similar to what we have for pesticides and food safety, where we have federal standards that the states then implement at the state level. And they also made it clear that testing for THC or Delta-9 THC must include the decarboxylation or similarly reliable method. And just as a quick chemistry lesson that none of us thought we were going to get right after lunch, THCA is actually, so the acid form of THC is actually the form that's present in greater quantities in the plant as it stands in the field. And when you heat that, that acid is decarboxylized and it is converted to Delta-9. And Delta-9 is the intoxicating form of that THC molecule. So you might hear folks talk about total THC or total Delta-9. That is taking into account the conversion of THCA to Delta-9 when it's heated. Okay, next slide. So first of all, the easy bill, right? 3 times a charm. House Bill 2284 actually adds a new commodity commission to Oregon, Hemp Commodity Commission. And as most of you are aware, commodity commissions really have 3 primary duties of promoting the crop, research around that crop, which we desperately need for hemp in Oregon. And we appreciate our friends at OSU and the work that they have done in this area. And then education. So that bill did pass and get signed by the governor. So we anticipate announcements at the end of the month for applications for an interim committee to run that commission, and then they will start the rulemaking process in January. Next slide. Okay, so those USDA final rule requirements. These are the requirements that the state of Oregon has to meet in order to be a state-approved plan. We have until the end of this year to meet those requirements. So we will be sending a draft state plan to USDA, hopefully by the end of this month, if not the first part of October. They include a background check. So anybody who has a felony associated with a controlled substance can no longer participate in hemp programs around the country unless they were kind of grandfathered in. Sorry, that's not the appropriate term to use. Unless they were previously registered with a hemp program. Lauren mentioned that you have to have your crop tested no more than 28 days prior to harvest. The USDA final rule made that a 30-day pre-harvest window, and it's a hard and fast window. So if the grower doesn't get the crop harvested within that 30-day window, they must have a new pre-harvest test for any plants that are remaining in the ground. They require that the labs who are doing the tests are registered with the DEA by January 1st of 2023. we could see some movement here because that is a hard standard to meet if you are a lab that also works with marijuana that does not come from law enforcement, which in Oregon, even our ODA state lab cannot meet this requirement because our pesticides program, for example, brings marijuana samples, and they don't recognize our state-run program as a legal program. So I anticipate that one we will see some changes around. And then the other piece is that you can only have one variety per field. That's a change. In the past, Oregon has allowed multiple varieties in a field. Next slide. Growers will also have to file with the USDA Farm Services Agency. And part of this is making sure that law enforcement has access to information on where their growers are growing. It also means that growers hopefully will be able to meet with representatives from FSA and learn about federal programs that they might qualify for, which is, I think, something that a lot of our hemp growers could benefit from because many of them are very new to agriculture all the way around. There's changes in that if you have a pre-harvest test that's above 1%, that's considered a negligent violation. And if you have more than 3 negligent violations in a 5-year period, you're kicked out of the program for a certain length of time. Positive, it allows for research licenses, so we'll be putting those into place. And then the state also has to make sure that we are reporting to the USDA the total acreage planted, harvested, and how much was disposed or remediated. Next slide, please. How ODA meets those requirements really depends on having the statutory authority to do things, specifically the background check. Yes, sorry. So I would draw your attention, Dave Losh with USDA NAS indicated there's going to be a survey for hemp growers going out this year, and that will be the first time that USDA has surveyed hemp growers that I'm aware of on this broad scale. So that's, you know, anybody growing hemp, please encourage them to complete that. So House Bill 3000 gave ODA the authority to do everything that we need to do under the USDA final rules. This was a very broad bill. I would say it was probably 4 bills that ended up compiled together in one, and it addressed a number of things under that cannabis umbrella of both hemp and marijuana. So adult use cannabinoids, things like that Delta 9 THC, we're also seeing other cannabinoids like Delta 8, which is also intoxicating, coming out in the marketplace. So House Bill 3000 created statutory authority for OLCC to prohibit the sales of adult use cannabis items to minors. And so they have put out temporary rules to address that, and we'll be finalizing those rules later this year. It also directed OLCC to set the maximum concentrations for that total Delta 9 THC and any other adult use cannabinoids in both marijuana and hemp products, and gives ODA the ability to work with Oregon Health Authority to determine if a site is a registered medical marijuana site. This is primarily a safety issue for many of the programs in the agency, pesticides, ag water quality. And when we receive a complaint, being able to determine is somebody legally licensed or registered with one of the 3 state programs. Next slide, please, Carla. So as I said, it gives ODA authority to do what we need to do under the USDA requirements. It gives ODA authority to set the amount of THC allowed in hemp commodities transported within Oregon. So if you are taking the floral material of this plant and extracting the oil and then selling it to somebody else, that extraction process concentrates the THC, and it's going to be above 0.3. So we're looking at ways to protect those folks who are transferring that oil that is still legal to a secondary processor or another handler. And then it requires that ODA establish requirements for tracking. So maybe something along the lines of that seed to sale tracking, but specifically for hemp commodities or products intended for ingestion and inhalation. Next slide, please. Did I mention this was a very broad bill? I promise only a couple more. So it gave ODA broader authority to deny or revoke licenses. That's something that ODA traditionally does not have a really strong authority to do in a lot of our programs. It also gave us the ability to establish additional license types, and then a $10,000 civil penalty for any hemp crop, meaning a grower who is registered with ODA, but has the crop that tests above 10%, which is arguably not a hemp crop. And they shouldn't be growing it under their hemp license. Next slide. And finally, it created a task force on cannabis-derived intoxicants. So the governor's office this fall or winter will be convening that task force. ODA, OLCC, a number of legislators, Oregon State University, both hemp and marijuana industry and the public are identified as seats on that task force. And there's funding that comes out of the marijuana program that goes into an illegal marijuana market enforcement grant program that goes to local law enforcement officials. And so this bill provided additional funding. I think it basically doubled that funding. And then it created the ability for law enforcement that if they are looking at a cannabis operation and they work with ODA, OLCC, or the Oregon Health Authority and determine that that person is not registered or licensed with any one of those 3 state regulated programs, and if the grower has more than 4 cannabis plants, which we're allowed to have under the home grow statute, that law enforcement can consider that to be illegal cannabis regardless of its THC concentration. Because they were finding that a lot of folks were claiming that their crop was hemp, may or may not have submitted a hemp application to ODA, and law enforcement was struggling to have the appropriate authority to take action against those folks. And so it created this. And if you've followed some of the news accounts, Klamath County especially has felt that this was a very useful tool that went into effect immediately after House Bill 3000 was signed. Okay, next slide. And here we thought we were done with House Bill 3000. I apologize. It creates directed OLCC to develop in rule a method to determine if a plant is hemp or marijuana. They call it presumptive marijuana, and basically it involves doing spot checks on a grow site, taking a limited number of samples, and if they meet the requirements of that rule, then the entire farm may be considered marijuana, so presumptive marijuana. And Mike Odenthal will talk to you about this more. This is part of our Operation Blue Rock. And then the other piece of that is we have entered into an interagency agreement for OLCC staff to assist ODA in carrying out hemp. So I will leave the in-depth portion of that to Mike. And then looking forward, next slide, please. So Governor Brown signed House Bill 3000 on July 19th. ODA filed temporary rules based on some of what was in that bill to include increased reporting and record keeping requirements, how we're going to enforce the presumptive marijuana rules that OLCC also filed soon after Governor Brown signing that. We put rules into place to increase our enforcement authority for any violation of its detainment. If anybody violates the hemp program rules or statutes, we have increased authority now in rule to prohibit them from reapplying to the program for 2 years. We have a new process for cannabis waste and disposal that growers have to tell us when they want to dispose of a crop. We give them permission, and then they tell us when they actually did that disposal and document it with photos. And then we have some new authority due to House Bill 3000 that we put into these rules around licensure. If someone plants either before making application to the department or even after applying, but before ODA has issued the license. Next slide, please. So I mentioned we're going to be submitting a draft state plan to USDA. Part of that is adopting rules. So the proposed rules were put out for public comment at the beginning of the month. That comment period closes on October 22nd. So we are taking written comments currently, and we'll hold a virtual public comment hearing on September 28th. We also will be starting a second round of rulemaking later this month to make those temporary rules that I discussed on the previous slide permanent, and then work on setting that THC amount for transportation of commodities within the state. And then looking out 6 months to the next year, where we're going to be working on that tracking requirements for hemp commodities or items. And then also, as Lauren mentioned, reassessing the fees for the hemp program to make sure that we're meeting all of the pieces that are required. And so with that, I'm going to, if you want to go to the next slide, Carla, turn it over to Mike Odenthal to dive in deeper on that presumptive marijuana piece.
Good afternoon. I'm Mike Odenthal. I'm the new hemp program manager. I just about said pesticides. I've been there for about, a month and a half, maybe coming on 2 months now. Prior to that, and the reason that pesticide slips off my lips, that's what I did for the previous 14 years, 10 of those as the lead investigator. And along about last February, Lisa Hansen asked me to help the hemp program establish their enforcement program. So I started writing SOPs and processes and all that. And then we got wrapped up into Operation Table Rock. So then that's been the rest of my summer. You can see why we called this Operation Table Rock. Any of you that know the terrain around Medford, the Table Rocks are a very significant landmark. And we needed something to name this other than being a focused inspection or blitz inspection. We had all sorts of names that weren't just very politically correct. So we came up with this. Now I have to tell you that the inspector that gave me this photo sent this with the caption of calling with a question mark, hot rocks, because everything you see in the foreground is not hemp, although it was being raised under the guise of a hemp registration. Carla, next slide, please. This is a flyer that Sonny actually put together for us several years ago that's still valid, that we get out to our growers. And this very clearly tells the grower the process by which they need to do things to raise their hemp. And I can tell you that where every circle there is a problem with our hemp growers. First off, they're making applications year round. We're still receiving applications for current year growers, and we're at harvest season. That tells you something. Their applications are not complete. They're a complicated application, but they're not taking the time to do it right. The next step, plant and grow. They're planting long before they receive their registration, if they ever receive their registration, because they don't go through the process. Lauren mentioned they're not getting their pre-harvest tests done. In a lot of cases, they're not. And then they're harvesting and selling without having the appropriate tests done, so that crop can never go to market. Sometimes they do get a pre-harvest test, but they don't bother to make sure it gets to us so that we don't know that it's actually been tested. And then they're not registering for the next year. So it's just a snapshot of our problem hemp growers. And I'm not going to tell you that every one of our hemp growers is a problem. We have got a good core base of really reliable farmers that are raising hemp, but we've got that other side that's not so good. Next slide, Carla. Before I go into presumptive marijuana, I just want to refresh you. Lauren talked about this. Remember, hemp is anything that's 0.3% THC or less. Okay, next slide, Carla. So OLCC was directed by House Bill 3000 to develop rules for presumptive marijuana testing. And here's what the rule said. If you've got mature plants and you take composite samples of those mature plants, if 50% or more of those samples test at 5% THC or above, then we are going to presume that everything on that farm is marijuana. The same thing goes if the average total THC among all of the composite samples taken are at or above 5% THC, then we are going to presume that that farm is all marijuana. Now you'll note that anything 0.3% and less is hemp, and we are presuming anything 5% or above is marijuana. There's a gap there. And so it's kind of a no man's land. It's not hemp, but we are not able to presume that the entire farm is marijuana if we're between that 5% and the 0.3%. And we've had quite a few farms at that point. If we're sampling immature plants, those plants that don't have any buds, then the rule said 50% of those samples would test at a ratio of 5.5 to 1 THC to CBD. And that's a process by which the lab that we're using estimates how much THC is in that plant versus how much CBD is in that plant. It's not an exact number because juvenile plants don't really exhibit as much THC as they would normally once they're at a maturity. So it's an estimate. The other requirements are 50% test at or above 1% THC, or the average of all those samples is at or above 1%. And those would be samples that we would have to send to a full-up lab like our enforcement lab in Portland to analyze to come up with those numbers. What we have learned since we've been down here in Medford, Southern Oregon, conducting these analyses, when OLCC wrote this rule, they didn't really understand how the light lab worked. And the light lab 3 is the portable device that we're using. When the light lab gives you a ratio result, it's either going to be normally a 1 to 0 THC to CBD or a 0 to 1 THC to CBD, and sometimes it'll give you a couple other numbers, but it will not give you something like a 5 to 1. It doesn't determine how much THC is really there. It just tells you that, you know, we found THC in the 1 and in the 0 for the CBD. We didn't find any CBD. And so if the plant's not generating any CBD at this point, it's not going to when it's mature. So our rule didn't really support what we get from our laboratory results, which made life a little interesting. So we had to modify the way we were going to do things. So when we get the presumptive marijuana based on the mature plants, we are detaining that field, and then we will go through the hearings process and likely order destruction of that cannabis. If we get a an immature sample, we are sending that grower a letter that said, hey, we're getting an indication that your hemp may not be compliant. We will be back out to see you again when the plants get more mature. And that's the way we're dealing with those. So we just had to modify things as we go forward. Go ahead, next slide, Carla. So if I can tell you that Operation Table Rock was a huge undertaking to plan in a matter of, I think we had 3 or 4 weeks to get this thing pulled together. I would be underestimating the tasks that we managed to get pulled together. This was a monster undertaking, and the fact that we got it pulled together and we got this many agencies working together the way they have since middle of July is just nothing short of amazing. Every local agency that you see up there and or state agency just jumped to the task and went way out of their way to assist us, the Department of Agriculture, to get this job done. Because the half a dozen of us in ag could not have even begun to think about doing this without all of these agencies that jumped in here. I can't say enough about Rich Evans and at OLCC and his assistants. He's really the backbone of putting this thing together, because he had all the people and the resources. He and I worked together and came up with the plan and brought it together. The inspector manual that we put together originally, I think, was like 40 pages of processes and procedures that we wanted everybody to do. And during the next 2 weeks of when we got started, we added another likely 60 pages. I think we're about 100 pages in that manual now, because of all of the things that we had to adjust and change and work through. So it was huge. Jackson County and Josephine County Sheriff's Departments have been spectacular and really went way out of their way to make sure that we had some law enforcement coverage when we needed it for security issues right off the bat. And, you know, they are already stretched super thin. So the fact that they were able to do that for us is nothing short of remarkable, and it showed their dedication to us. The state police jumped in and has been helpful. The city of Medford police have been sending people over, officers over to help us. Just it's very gratifying to see the amount of interagency cooperation and effort here to get all this done. Both code enforcement programs from the counties have been jumping with us, as well as water resources from the state. You know, it's just everybody there. It's been amazing. The relationships that have been built here are going to pay off hugely in the future. Things like knowing who to call to ask the silly question. When we first started this operation, we would get a grower that we're visiting saying, well, I'm a rec grower, so you don't have authority here, even though he had a hemp registration. Or I'm a medical grower. And because OLCC has inspectors that inspect both rec and they have some medical inspectors, we were able to determine that none of the above was true. It was all supposed to be hemp. They didn't have a rec, and we were able to get those things done. And so early on, we discovered that having all three of the different types of cannabis represented on the ground was a real huge benefit for us, and moving things forward. Just yesterday, one of OLCC's rec inspectors called and asked, hey, I'm at this location. Have you got a hemp registration for this guy? And those are calls that didn't happen before this all took place. So this has been a really great experience as far as pulling us together and really helping to make this one group moving towards the regulation of cannabis. Okay, next slide, Carla. So Operation Table Rock, what was the great grandiose plan? We were to look at all of the registered growers down in Southern Oregon. So we, ODA, put together a list of all of our registered growers. And we started at about 318 growers at the beginning of the summer. We've added more. We've had some canceled since we got started. So that's a loose number, but that's about where we started. And we focused, initially we were thinking we were going to focus on 3 counties, Jackson, Josephine, and Douglas counties. And when we got here, we rapidly realized that Jackson and Josephine were more than we could bite off. And so we had to step out of Douglas County. So we'll be addressing those Douglas later on. The next part of the process, though, was that once we identified that grow site, we needed to do a safety assessment of, can we go on this place safely, or do we need law enforcement to back us up? So OLCC, Rich, being a retired state police, he was a state police superintendent, he used his police background to build up a process so that we could find out what's going on with this place and what do we know. That was a huge step in this process, because we discovered where we could go without law enforcement and where we couldn't. Okay, and that held up for quite a while. Later on, about midway through the process, we had received a phone threat from an unknown grower threatening weapons and response to us making entry. And then one of the teams actually was offered bribes, and the personnel around that guy offering the bribe started acting pretty strangely, so they exited. Since then, we have not gone anywhere without law enforcement. We still had the safety assessments done, which included drive-bys to see what we could see on the grow site, but we have used law enforcement exclusively since that date. We start every morning with a safety briefing. The regional manager for OLCC, Jim Hunter, another retired law enforcement officer, starts the day with going through, here's our assignments, here's what we're going to do today. And then we talk about reminding the safety and the protocols, the emergency exit code word, and briefing all of the law enforcement officers as they come on so they know what's going on. It's really quite it's a brief meeting, but it's pretty intense and it's rewarding to watch. It very much reminds me of military operations orders and the days when we were giving out the directions there. That's the way these things go. And they're going through the safety assessment, especially as we've started issuing search warrants. Where could we run into issues? Once they get the briefing, the teams get together, make their plans on how they're going to go out and do their things. Then they go out and hit those sites, and they're gathering samples. And so what we asked them to do was to gather a minimum of 3 samples per grow site. If there were more than 30 production areas, we wanted 10% of the total of the production areas. So they have gone into some grow sites that have 60 to 100 hoop houses. They're gathering 10% of that number of hoop houses as their samples. So we get, it's not truly a representative sample, but we've got a good sampling that we can use. If it comes back as presumptive, we're going to say that whole place is marijuana. Next slide, Carla. Once they get the samples taken, we ask them to, we're doing all the testing back here at OLCC headquarters. We could take a machine with us to the field, but we don't want them on site that long because each sample takes about 20 minutes to run. They could be there for hours. That was a security nightmare. We said, bring them back here. We'll secure them using the appropriate chain of custodies and all that, and we'll analyze them here. So anytime you come in to visit OLCC headquarters in Medford, just walk by close. You don't have to get inside to know what we're doing because it stinks. But anyway, we do that. Then the OLCC lead inspector for that particular site writes up his or her report and then refers that to ODA. We also get the referral from the guys doing the light lab processing and get those results. We then determine, what do we have? Is it presumptive? Does it fail? Or is it good hemp? If it's good hemp, we're sending the grower a letter that said, hey, you meet the criteria, you falls within the criteria of hemp, go out and do great things. If it's in that margin zone, we tell them, hey, we're going to come back and see you. If it's above, we're issuing detainments and moving forward. So that's the down and dirty of how this process has worked. Next slide, Carla. And this is just a map. Lauren showed you earlier the map that was distribution up for the whole state. This is Southern Oregon, and we highlighted things that would be places that we for sure needed to go visit, places that we have visited, places that were good, places that OLCC was still working on versus ODA's working on. This map changes daily. So this is an older map. It was updated a couple weeks ago. It doesn't look dramatically the same at all. The colors have changed. But that gives you an idea of just what the concentration is and where we've been playing. Next slide, Carla. So what have we found? We've visited 315 sites so far. We've got some more to do. So far, for immature plants, we've had 53 positives, 81 negative. Mature plants, 50 positive and 15 negative. Next slide, Carla. We still have about 24 that are out for testing, at least as of this date when we made this slide. I think most of those have been turned back to me now, and everything we've tested this week has been positive. We hit a new record for THC content this morning at 32.9%. That's some really good hemp. Matter of fact, there's some rec growers that would be jealous to have that kind of THC content. Denied access, we had 26. We've whittled that down quite a bit. We've issued a bunch of search warrants, and we've been able to sweet talk a bunch of these guys into allowing us to come in and sample. So that number's down quite a bit. No contact with 17, and we're still working through those guys. No hemp. 49 folks didn't even plant hemp this year. They had an active registration, decided not to grow, multiple reasons, mostly water issues. And so they just weren't. And we said, hey, turn in your cancellation or let us know that you're not growing this year. 46 cases have been referred to law enforcement specifically. I can tell you that I've got a spreadsheet that we put all of our results on a daily basis that we send up to our Department of Justice attorneys, so they know what we're doing. But I also turn that over to the drug enforcement teams here, because even a immature sample that indicates a 1-0 ratio may be enough for them to obtain a search warrant if they've got some other data on a place they've been watching. So we're giving them that information so they can work for it. And then we've referred 32 other cases to other agencies. Water Resources, OSHA are the primaries. DEQ has had a couple because of solid waste issues. So that's what's going on. Next slide, Carla. So I wrote this slide up last week, and detainments issued is up to, I think, 17 now, with a bunch more to serve. Search warrants is up to 17, and I think we've got for sure one left, and there's a couple more that have popped up that I think we're going to have to write. So we're getting down on the search warrants.
Mike,
yes, sir.
Our hour is slipping by, and I want to make sure we get ready for questions. So let's just leave this slide up and switch to questions, because we're at the end of our time here.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. I can't see the people because of the slide, so I can't tell
Oh,
who is.
Carla, you can take it off.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions at this point? I have a question, but I'm afraid to ask it because it probably is really unanswerable. I after all of this, I still do not understand the difference between a marijuana plant and a hemp plant. Are they the same plant, and it's how you grow it that controls the amount of THC? And I don't understand it from a biological, and I don't want to get into the whole science of it, but is it basically the same plant, and how you grow it determines whether or not it's going to be hemp or marijuana?
So let me give you an easy.
Mike.
Oh, real quick answer, because it's complicated.
Yeah, let me simplify it in the terms of, think of different varieties of, say, sweet corn. Some sweet corn is a little sweet, other sweet corn is really sweet. And it's all corn, it's just different varieties. And that's basically what we've got with cannabis. They're the same plant, different varieties. The hemp doesn't produce near the THC, whereas the marijuana does. Some of how you raise it culturally will affect that, but that's the bottom line. It's the
If
genetics.
you looked at them side to side, would they look the same? If If you had a marijuana plant and a hemp plant right next to each other, would they look the same?
Generally, you can't tell the difference.
Okay, thank you. And by the way, I'm Tyson because my laptop died and he lent me his. So thank you.
I will just add, because that was a really good question, Stephanie. One of the challenges that all the state agencies have, and even communities, particularly in Southern Oregon right now, you can't tell. You don't know what you're looking at. And so our really premise for what we were doing in Southern Oregon around Operation Table Rock was to take what we knew we had registered, what OLCC had in their registry, and figure out, is this legal? And if it is who is the regulator? And if it's not registered in any other place, it is definitely illegal. And I can tell you, we have a lot of illegal operations that are not on either side of the registration process. And that's going to put a lot more pressure on law enforcement, and it already has.
Okay, thank you. And we have time for another couple of questions. Jim Johnson, did you have a question? And then Barbara and Josh.
Oh, no.
No question for me.
Okay, your mic's on. Barbara?
Well, so actually, I saw Elin and Josh ahead of me.
Okay, Elin, and then Josh, and then Barbara.
Just want to say thank you, impressive. When Director Taylor, I talked to you not terribly long ago before 3,000 went past, and you went from that to this. Huge impacts on our industry down south because of water issues, as well as dealing with labor, paying under the table and those kind of things in order to compete. So thank you. We don't want to harm the good hemp growers that are doing the right thing, but we want to go after those illegal folks who are kind of scary people. So thanks.
Okay, Josh. Josh, can you hear me? Can anybody else hear Josh? I can't hear him. Still can't hear you. Okay, I guess he's given up. Technology is challenging. Okay, I think that's it for that item. Thank you guys. Barbara, did you want to say something else?
Stephanie, I have a couple questions.
Okay.
Barbara Boyer for the record. I have a lot of questions, but I'll keep it brief. So is there a public site that we can find who is registered for what as far as hemp versus cannabis?
Can you answer?
Sunny Summers. So for hemp, yes, it is public record. For marijuana, no. If you know the name of the business, OLCC has some information, but it's not necessarily going to provide you with the location. They have different statutory protections in those programs, whereas hemp, there are no protections, so it's all publicly available.
Okay. And then my other question is, so is ODA in tandem at all times when there's an investigation with with the feds or the Oregon State Police? Is ODA in tandem with them at all times?
So, Barbara, for Operation Table Rock, the focus that we have in Southern Oregon, I would say the answer is we're working in tandem with law enforcement of various types. You saw the local, the state police, and sometimes that does involve federal authorities. Remember, everything that we just talked about, and I'm sorry we burned up the hour so fast, is applied statewide. We are challenged with resources to apply that methodology we're doing in Southern Oregon statewide, and will continue to be challenged because we can't sustain this. I'll just be honest with you, and the effort that we're doing. So we're going to have to keep it up at some level, but we're also going to have to expand it into other parts of the state because the Operation Table Rock is not unique. It just has a lot of our registrants, about half of them. So For safety reasons, and I can't emphasize this enough, we will not put our staff in what we believe to be an unsafe place. Our staff generally working outdoors and the work we do generally can be at risk. That's just the nature of that. You all have that in some of your businesses, obviously. This particularly though, and so we will not hesitate to pull staff and connect with law enforcement or someone to help us assess whether we can be there or not and under what circumstances, which I will just leave you all with this because I know you're trying to wrap up. The thing we didn't talk about are the water issues, the ancillary issues that involve other natural resource agencies. Elin, I know you have big concerns around that. We do too. They've taken somewhat of a backseat. I'm not saying they're not important. They are very important because of some of the safety issues in Southern Oregon to try to get that cleaned up first so that we then can go in and start working through that. The natural resource agencies are keeping abreast of this. The information that are becoming on law enforcement, they know what to look for. We've given them some primers on, this is some things on the water side. If you see a big pump and it's in a stream, you need to connect with water resources. That is happening today. And so there's much work to be done. And I'm going to tell you, this is going to be an evolution, what you just saw today for several years now, I think. It's not going to be overnight.
Well, thank you guys for all you're doing. It is impressive how far it's come in a very short amount of time. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that, Barbara. And I just want to say thank you to Elin for her comments. And it's really been a ton of work from Mike and Sunny and Lauren and our investigators and inspectors, many of whom have transitioned from the noxious weed program into the hemp program because of some of the funding issues we had, and they've all stepped up. And the only reason we're as far as we are is because of so much work and effort by our team, and I can't thank them enough. They've really done yeoman's work, and so hats off to all of them.
Absolutely. Thank you all very much. And we have the next agenda item. Apologies to Jessica Jansen, who I hope is with us, for running late. She's going to give us an update on the Ag in the Classroom program.
Yes, thank you. You can hear me okay?
Yes.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for the time today. My name is Jessica Jansen. I'm the Director of Oregon Agriculture in the Classroom, and I think Carla has a couple of slides. Wonderful. Thank you, Carla. I see a lot of familiar names and faces today. Thank you again for the opportunity to share just a little bit about what we've got going on at Oregon Agriculture in the Classroom. And I'm going to start kind of at the beginning for those of you who might not be as familiar with our program. Our mission is really just to help students understand. This is the first slide there, Carla. If you want to go ahead and change them, that'd be great. I'll remember to give you cues here. To help students grow in their knowledge of agriculture, the environment, and natural resources for the benefit of all of us as Oregonians. So next slide, we're doing that a little bit through teachers primarily. And so it's cross-curricular materials and lessons that are all aligned to educational standards that educators are required to teach. And we're doing this in all education environments in Oregon. So primarily public education environments, but also work with private homeschool, after-school programs, extracurricular programs statewide. So next slide is just talking about some of our logistics. So we are affiliated on a national level with the National Agriculture in the Classroom organization, which has affiliates in all 50 states and a couple of U.S. territories as well. And here in Oregon, we are housed at the Oregon State University College of Agricultural Sciences in Strand Ag Hall. I saw Dean Sams on here. That's a long-standing relationship, which has just been wonderful for both our program and mutually beneficial for the college as well. But we are structured as a separate private nonprofit organization. So all of the funding that we receive comes from grant and private donations. So I'm just going to talk about a few of the programs that we have in resources that we have for teachers. So our lending library is a major program. This is resources that we send to teachers. And on the next slide is some of the kits, which is part of our lending library. And that is just a resources that teachers can use with their students in their classroom. So these are things like you see in the picture, germination kits, but they're also soil testing kits and kits that help students understand a specific part of agriculture a little bit more. And we're constantly working to develop new and innovative kits and resources to distribute to teachers across the state. Next slide. And then a large portion of what we do is develop lesson plans that teachers can access on our website through a searchable database. They can search by subject and grade level and access these for use in their curriculum. So again, using whatever they have to teach normally with an agricultural lens on it. So we might be looking at something like circumference and diameter using squash and pumpkin, so that students can have this applicability with the agricultural lens on it. On the right side of your screen there, you'll also see a screenshot of a big initiative that we did last school year, transferring a lot of our materials to virtual education friendly. So we had Google Classroom resources, and teachers really could use those very easily during a time of distance learning, which is ongoing resource that we have on our website as well. Next slide, Carla. Thank you. The agricultural literacy project is something that we've been doing for over 12 years now. And this is where we send volunteers into classrooms. They read a book and do a corresponding activity to reinforce the message of the book. The Girl Who Thought in Pictures, which is the story of Dr. Temple Grandin, was our book for 2020 and 2021. We extended it because of the nature of virtual education. And it was a great effort. We did a lot virtually with classrooms connecting on their own Zoom platforms, and we're able to continue the project where otherwise the in-person connection was just modified to be a virtual format. So we're looking forward to selecting another book this spring and continuing that in whichever way is best suited for modality that we're in come January in schools. And then we also run a very popular calendar art contest. Hopefully some of you have seen our published calendar before. This is kindergarten through sixth graders are invited to depict anything that they'd like about Oregon agriculture. And we receive about 2,000 entries a year and compile it into a school year calendar that teachers can put up in their classrooms. And each day has a fun fact about agriculture. So this is the cover of this year's calendar. And I'll definitely be happy to send calendars. I'll send some to the office through Carla, and would invite anybody that would like a copy to let me know. I'd be happy to send you one for your office as well. It's a really wonderful celebration of Oregon agriculture from our students. And then this resource has been another longstanding resource that we've had with Oregon agriculture in the classroom. It's Get Organized. It's a curriculum for fourth grade primarily, but it does span third through fifth grade that teaches all about Oregon history, and then dives into the regions of growing regions of Oregon and different commodities that are grown in these regions. And this curriculum has just exploded. We've had several major school districts adopt this for fourth grade curriculum, Medford being a big one, Lebanon School District just in the last year have adopted it in their schools, so that all of the fourth grade students are receiving this curriculum, which has a corresponding teacher's guide with curriculum for the educator as well. We estimate that about 15,000 copies are in use across the state of this the current version, as well as previous versions as well. We've updated it 3 times and distribute that through a big donor program as well. Through our fundraising dinner every year, donors have the opportunity to sponsor books into classrooms. And then this last year, actually, we started in 2019 with a virtual field trip program that just really took off with virtual education. It was a very we had a lot of foresight. We didn't know, but it really took off, and we actually incorporated this with the specialty crop block grant that we received. You'll see some of the dairy and cattle projects. Obviously, those were not part of the specialty crop, but hazelnuts. We did a aquaponics that they grow basil out in Gresham. Christmas trees, wildly popular. We've done 20 so far virtual field trips. and had about 16,000 participants on those field trips with students, and another 14,000 views as we've published these on our YouTube page after the conclusion of the field trip. So it's just been great activity to help students connect with farmers in real time. We allow the students to ask questions and engage with what the tour guide in whatever capacity we can. We usually have about 40 to 50 classrooms on each field trip. It just really varies. And it's just been a wonderful opportunity for students to get a little taste of Oregon agriculture from the comfort of their classroom. So we look forward to doing continuing this year. We're going to be doing about one a month and visiting a variety of sites across our state. And then the other project that we did with our specialty crop block grant from 2019 is this subscription box. So this was a box that we sent once a month to 66 classrooms throughout the state last school year. They received a box that featured a different theme every month. It's kind of hard to see there probably on your slide, but you can see this kind of tried to match the seasonality of the month and with a crop and then an activity for the students to complete with their classroom. And we prioritize teachers that aren't familiar or aren't using our resources already. So it's a really great way to introduce the educator to how they can incorporate agriculture into their classroom and some of the resources that exist within our program. So next slide, we actually are expanding this program this year. We have 74 classrooms, kindergarten through 5th grade. And the map there, you can see where these are headed this school year all across the state. And the students are taking a pre and post agricultural literacy quiz to kind of assess what they're learning. And the same kind of style we're doing where the students get a activity to do each month, and we're doing this one in 2 grade bands. We're doing kindergarten through 2nd, and then 3rd through 5th box. So there's a little bit of difference in grade level appropriateness to the lessons and curriculum that we're providing the teachers. So this has been a really successful program. We had over 300 classrooms apply. We only had those 74 spots this year, but just a really fun program that's really brought, I think, a bright spot to teachers and classrooms throughout what otherwise has been a pretty challenging school year. And then the other big initiative that we do is training educators. So we do workshops, most of those last school year, all of them were virtual. We did have a couple of in-person ones this summer through Summer Ag Institute and a couple other partner programs. But most of them this school year, we do plan to have some in person later on, but we will be starting off virtually as well. And in those cases, we send materials oftentimes to the educator ahead of the workshop so they can follow along with us with supplies and resources. We had 348 teachers participate in workshops last school year, and we're looking forward to a complete series of monthly workshops this school year, which will be grade level specific. So some will be secondary and some will be more for the primary educators as well. But just again, a great way to introduce teachers to different subjects within agriculture. We bring in partners to present on these topics. Many people from Oregon State University, trying to partner them with experts so that they can really get their questions answered about agricultural topics. And then this just kind of highlights our program impact. The map there that you see of Oregon has a pin for the different schools that we work with. So you can see we're reaching all corners of the state. We have about 304,000 students that we impacted last year. And again, that's mainly through those educators. So there was 4,000 educators, over 4,000 educators within our network. And then we distributed over 2,000 items through our lending library to these teachers all over the state. And the last slide here just kind of shows our team. So myself as executive director, we have an education programs coordinator that works statewide, Brittany Capel. And then we also have a Washington County program that's a partnership with the Tualatin Soil and Water Conservation District in Washington County, serving just educators within Washington County, and that's Casey Blake. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that anybody has about our program and resources. And again, just thank you all for the time to share a little bit about what we've got going on in agricultural literacy.
Thank you. That was really well put together, good slides. And I have to say, personally, it was nice to kind of end on an uplifting note with a program that's looking to the future. Because we've had a pretty intense meeting today with a lot of like heavy input. So that was delightful. Thank you for being here and doing that. Are there any questions?
Barbara has one question.
Yes.
So Barbara Boyer for the record. So you only have room for 74 subscription boxes. Is that my understanding?
Yeah.
And what's the barrier there?
It was a specialty crop block grant that we last year was a specialty crop block grant. We are extending it a little bit. This current one ends in March. And then we received another grant to kind of make up the rest of the school year. This year, you'll see this year's has a few non-specialty crops in the spring. So yeah, it was just a grant that we wrote. And it's one of those things that it's hard to anticipate the interest. And it far surpassed what we anticipated, which is always a good thing because it's something that we definitely will look forward to continuing in the future and hopefully get some more funding to make that happen.
And then I actually turn a lot of my teacher friends onto the calendar and they love it. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Much appreciated.
All right. Does anybody else have any questions? Shantae.
Yeah. Yes, Shantae Johnson here. I just had one question. It looks like that program is really well received and liked. It's amazing that students still get to participate in, doing farm visits during this time. I was just curious, has there been any opportunities for, reaching out to other non-traditional farmers, such as BIPOC farmers, or for some of these field trips? Just curious.
Yeah, certainly. That is a priority for us. And as we fill out our schedule this year, that would definitely be something that we're looking to do. So if there's suggestions, we don't have, we try to do it somewhat seasonal so that it makes sense for whatever months that we're looking at. But I would definitely welcome suggestions for any field trip hosts. It's a really simple, that's one of the beauties of the virtual modality is that we can come out and do a field trip, and it takes about an hour from start to finish. We only are on with the students for about 30 minutes, just from the attention span perspective of virtual field trips is what we've kind of found as a best practice. And but no, we would definitely welcome suggestions there, Shantae. I would love to connect with you if you have some suggestions for us for some great sites to visit.
Yes, I definitely do, and it might be nice for some of the farmers that are in my networks to be able to be connected. So I'd love to do that with you. Thank you.
I'll reach out. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? Thank you all again. That was a great presentation. We really appreciate it.
Wonderful. Thank you, and thank you for the ongoing support. Much appreciated. And hey, it's great to be in agricultural literacy. I think I agree with you that it's positive and thinking towards the future. So thank you again.
Actually, Jessica, I had just one quick question. How long have you been with the program?
Oh yeah, I have been in my role for 7 years now.
Well, you're doing a good job. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we are ready to move into board business, and I will do my best to get us out of here by 2:30. And my first contribution to that is going to be to not ask all the list of questions I have on the program area reports. I will send emails and get those questions answered offline. I only have one, though, for Director Taylor. I was going to ask it earlier, but I forgot. The Usda meeting, was there any kind of regional drought strategy discussed?
Yeah, so we did a roundtable with kind of my counterparts from the West. There we shared, the various impacts that we're experiencing. I talked a lot about, the heat dome as well, because that was more unique to Oregon and part of Washington. And then talked some about the various conversations that we were all having at, with our delegation. Could we help coordinate? And we're actually going to be following up that discussion next week when we have our a regional WASDA meeting tied to the NASDA meeting, and so we'll be following up some additional discussion on the different things that are happening at the federal level. One of the things that that was kind of in the works was a Western governor's letter that Governor Brown and a couple of her counterparts were leading. And so my counterparts from the Western states, we shared that letter because we had a draft, and they started reaching out to their governor's office, encouraging their various governors to sign on to that, requesting some additional assistance for the drought and the impacts across the West.
Okay, thank you very much. Does anybody else have any questions or comments on the program area reports? Carla, what I think I'm going to do is I'm just going to send you my questions by email and see if you can get answers for me, and maybe just share them with the board members, because I don't want to take the time today to do it. But anyone else, please do. Barbara?
Am I going to OWEB, or you're looking for comment?
Oh, yeah. Did you have any board reports, or if not, go to OWEB?
No, I'll do the same thing. I'll shoot questions to Carla. So.
Okay. All right, you're on for OWEB.
All right, we had our meeting July 27th, virtual. I don't know if any of you guys have heard, but there's some staff changes. Executive Director Maida Lofsgarden has taken a position as the Mount Hood National Forest Supervisor. She's very excited for this opportunity because it is her backyard. And she's excited because she's had, in all the jobs she's had large swaths, being the country, NRCS, or the state of Oregon with OWEB. So she's excited to be just focusing on one place. So we're sad to see her go, but really excited for her next chapter. And it's just, we'll see you when we see you. It's not farewell. So, and then Renee Davis, the deputy director, felt like she was not having a work-life balance and asked to step down. Before even Maida announced that she was leaving, Renee Davis, her deputy, asked to actually step aside in that position, and has chosen to take one of the new 2 positions at OWEB, which are 2 general fund positions, which is the first time OWEB has received any general funds. Pretty exciting news for OWEB. One of them is, I think it's fire policy, and the other one, and Renee Davis is taking the fire policy, and the other one is climate change position. So that's some exciting news. I became co-chair of the OWEB board at the last meeting, so I'm excited to take that role on. And then we had fun talking about the new salmon plate design. And they actually auctioned off on eBay number 1 through 20. So that was real fun to watch. I'm getting a bunch of feedback. I don't know what's going on. So so that was a lot of fun. I actually bid on one and received one of them. So that was kind of fun. So you'll see me sporting around 00004 at some time. And that's really just to, and then we actually were going over the wildfire response grants. OWEB was granted some money from the governor to help with some wildfire response from last fall. And with that, I will leave it there unless there's any questions, or Director Taylor, did I forget anything? Okay. Thank you.
Any questions for Barbara? Okay, Director Taylor, I think the board needs to make a recommendation on the Oregon Agricultural Heritage Commission, whether or not to reappoint Doug Kramer or nominate someone new. If you would take that discussion, I got to run get a glass of water.
Sure. Yeah. So as some of the board maybe recall, and our new board member Chad Allen has a lot of perspective and history here. He could also bring forward, but 4 of the board members for the Oregon or commission members for the Oregon Agriculture Heritage Commission need to be recommended from the Board of Agriculture and those 4 have to be actively engaged in farming or ranching, and then 1 needs to have an agricultural water quality focus. So the board actually recommends 5 individuals. And so they are staggered and tiered off. And so as they come up for the end of their first term, but the beginning of their with the ability to get re-recommended for a second term, it has to come before the board. And so Commissioner Doug Kramer, his term will be ending in January of next year. And so the decision before the board is to recommend him for a second term, or if the board wants to not recommend him necessarily for a second term, we would then, between now and the December meeting, go out, ask for a call of interested applicants, etc. Commissioner Kramer has said he is interested in being reappointed. And so that's kind of the question before the board.
So Barbara Boyer, for the record, are you looking for a motion on that?
Yes, thank you for taking that over. I can speak now. Yes, do we have a motion with regard to reappointing Doug Kramer?
Barbara Boyer, for the record, I so move appointing Doug Kramer for a second and final term. Is it a final term also?
Correct. Terms are 4 years with the ability to serve no more than 2 consecutive.
Okay, thank you.
Is there a second?
A second.
Okay, Elin Miller has seconded. Is there any discussion? Okay, all in favor say aye or thumbs up.
Aye.
All right, thank you. And you'll, Carla, or somebody will let Doug know that we have taken that action. Thank you very much. And just so you guys, yes, go ahead.
Sorry, Chair Halleck, just to note, we will prepare a letter of recommendation that goes to the OWA board. Is that correct, Carla? Yeah, Carla, yes. And so that usually goes under the chair's signature. So we will likely put it under the incoming chair, Brian Harper's.
Thank you very much. And I do have to confess, since we've been outed, that for our last meeting, Tyson and I met with Barbara at her place. So we're all together, even though we're socially distanced.
6 feet apart.
6 feet apart. But since my computer crashed, now you know. Okay. So we need to discuss the public comments that we heard today. And I think Jim Johnson is on here. And let's start first with this City of Portland land use issue. And Director Taylor or Jim, do you want to has the department been involved in this issue at all? And we'd like your thoughts, I think, on, I know some other groups have weighed in against what the City of Portland wants to do. This is a conditional use permit that Multnomah County would issue. And we have been asked if the board, I think the request is that we make a statement opposing this. And so I'm wondering if you have something you'd like to say about this, Director Taylor, or maybe Jim.
Let me say that I've been connected on this issue for several months now. Initially, I was called by staff at Multnomah County Planning Division asking for some technical assistance to understand how the land use law relates to siting of public facilities on farmland first, and then second, dealing with understanding soils classifications out in that area. And so I've been talking to Multnomah County staff a couple of times now over the last several months on that. I've also been received phone calls from probably some of the same parties that that provided comment to the board and answered questions for them related to, again, how it works, what is a public facility necessary for public service versus a utility facility. You know, a lot of those land use related definitional questions and the like. A lot of the parties, including a lot of farmers from out in that area. I've talked with 2 soil and water conservation districts out there, both the Clackamas and the East Multnomah, who are interested in that. And then I've talked with some people at the Oregon Association of Nurseries about this also. There are a lot of concerns from the ag community out there about this project. It's not only about conversion, but it's about compatibility with surrounding farming operations, and the fact that this is an urban facility serving urban needs, but it's being sited on rural lands. And a lot of the concerns that I've heard relate to the fact that the city of Portland went out and bought the land without talking to anybody, and then they've come back afterwards and they're just expecting to get a permit to site this on the property without looking at alternatives in the first place. So you know, ultimately, I think you're probably correct, Chair Halleck, that they're probably looking for some type of more direct involvement, either from the department or the board or both. We have not decided one way or the other at ODA what, you know, if we're going to, you know, get more directly involved. We are talking with everybody and providing technical assistance. I have been talking with DLCD staff about this also to help them to understand it. So that's kind of what our involvement's been to date.
Okay, Elin, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I just a bit of history. When I was regional administrator of EPA, we were dealing with bull run and enforcement issues and looking at mitigation matters. That was in the year 2007 to 8. And anyway, I kind of found this fascinating, especially if there hadn't been a lot of pre-work done. And I'd like to at least see the department investigate further as a potential, or I'd be also happy to say no from what we know right now.
Yeah, thank you. Anybody else want to comment on the Barbara?
Elin, you took the words right out of my mouth. You know, today I would say no, but I would like more information. And I don't know if there's a deadline, Jim. Do you?
Well, the thing to remember is that this is going to require a land use application, a conditional use permit that has to be submitted to Multnomah County. That will start a process. That there has been no application submitted to my knowledge, and if so, it hasn't been accepted as complete. So it hasn't initiated any public process where that would take comment. So, you know, I think I have had some contacts from consultants working for the city of Portland asking for some information. So it sounds to me like they're working on completing the application to get to Multnomah County. But where that's at yet, I do not know. I will say, and I'm glad Elin brought up what she did. In the past, when these kind of projects have occurred, and they're looking at you know, federal requirements, whether or not it's you know, prime farmland, so to speak, or whatever, the agencies involved have contacted ODA for our input. The first I ever heard of this was from the neighbors out there. The city of Portland has not contacted any of the stakeholders, to my knowledge, other than Multnomah County.
Anybody else? I would just say this is my last meeting. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, whoever that was.
Does
anyway,
my mic work now?
Yes.
Does it work? Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes. Who
I
is
just
it?
wanted to, I had a similar thought. This is Josh Zelensky, for the record.
Thank you.
I've heard from a couple of my fellow industry people today. We heard some we saw some written comments and we heard from a couple of them. I had the first kind of knowledge of this. One of the suppliers of bare root trees for our nursery wasn't going to have as many trees because they were actually renting this piece of ground. And that was kind of when I first heard of it, but I wasn't aware that it was a big issue until really today. But what I wanted to say was, like, basically what others have said here with, outright opposing it, I don't know, but has it been looked at? Whether we put this closer to the existing infrastructure so that there's not this giant, miles, or I think it was 6 miles of additional pipeline that needs to go with 800 or with 100-foot barriers on each side. That's pretty intrusive to the whole area versus just one small, 90-acre pasture or field. That would be.
I think, Josh, I think we lost you, but I think we get the drift of what you were saying. I would just echo, it's my last meeting. I think at a minimum, we need to track this and figure out when is the best. It sounds like the board, whoever, at least some of the board members might be interested in making a statement about this at some point, but it's unclear if now is the time to do it and exactly what the statement would be. Related to that, Jim, is this precedent setting? Is this by the city? I mean, I know their track record hasn't necessarily been good on the, how they handle these processes, but those are you don't necessarily have to answer that today, but when the board figures out what it wants to say, we're probably going to need some help to define what it is we want to say. But I think you get the drift of the concerns from Elin and Josh.
There's really 2 areas of issue here. One's the broader issue of an urban use on rural land, and that would be an issue whether it's the city of Portland or the city of Dayton doing this. And I've had experiences with the city of Dayton, about 15 years ago doing the same thing, going out and getting ag water to serve a rural need for. So that's the first, that's the first general issue, is urban versus rural. The second is loss of farmland and impacts to the surrounding farming operations, and that is a legitimate, conversion issue of quality farmland. What will be the impacts to the remaining operations out there from the facility and the like, and that would be the other area that we would be looking at also. So one's kind of a broader policy area, the other is a much more focused on the permit type thing in terms of the impacts to agriculture specific to that area.
So I know that some people have to leave at 2:30. So in order to keep moving along, can we get this? I would recommend maybe you give an update at the next meeting, or Director Taylor, do you have a suggestion for us?
Yeah, if I could insert a suggestion here. I think definitely let us add an update at the next meeting on this, but I think also we may want to just form a work group of a couple of members. So if something happens between now and then, we could pull that kind of approved work group together and start the discussion there in the interim. And I'm just going to throw names out there. So whether you or not, that's fine. I would throw out Elin, Barbara, Josh, because the 3 of you spoke. And if there was a 4th member who has a strong interest, I'd welcome you too. And that way, if we need to pull you together and get some direction from the board, or get the process of maybe what the board wants to say on this started before the next board meeting, we will have that already board sanctioned, kind of do it this way process set out.
I'm not sure if Josh is still with us, but Elin and Barbara, are you okay with doing that? Yes?
I'm seeing a bunch of thumbs up.
Okay, great. Okay. Are you there, Josh?
I would remark that we do have a person on the board now that's had some experience in this area, and it's Chad Allen. He's dealt with these issues in terms of the conditional use permits related to non-farm uses impacting farmland in Tillamook County. That's how I first really met Chad years and years ago, and he's had a very extensive experience in this area.
So Chad, do you want to be volunteered? Okay, great. Let's see, in order to get to what we really need everybody here for, Carla, do you want to do the 2022 meeting dates and locations before we lose people?
Yes, that would be great.
Do you have some recommendations?
I don't. I sent out a memo to folks just outlining the quarters that we typically meet in. We meet 4 times a year. And then I also included just some known dates of other either industry meetings or the legislative session and things like that. So just to give it some guidance, but I did not come with pre-established proposed dates.
And do we know if this is virtual or in person?
I think we're going to assume virtual, and if we can meet in person, we'll change that as we schedule meetings throughout the year. I think also we may want to consider scheduling 3 days in the event that we do go back to meeting in person, because we used to meet Tuesday evening for our work groups and then a full day on Wednesday and a half a day on Thursday. So while we're planning, I think we should block those 3 dates and then modify as meeting dates get closer.
And just on that topic, I think we will, some of you who have been on the board when we met in person, we had Regan, who came and did all the audio for us. He is able to do kind of provide those services with like a hybrid format. And so looking at still having the ability for folks who maybe can't travel to the whole meeting to be able to join virtually, at least for the full meetings. So there still may be flexibility when we're able to meet in person.
Just one other comment, and then Elin, I'm going to you. Maybe we should start by looking at the places we were supposed to go and we didn't go because of COVID. That's just a suggestion. I know that one of them was French Glen, but that was because of Pete Brentano primarily. So I don't know if that's still on the list. I can't remember if Ontario was or not. I think it was, so maybe.
Tillamook, Ontario, and French Glen were the places we had that we were not able to.
Okay, Elin, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, the only thing at some point in time, whether it makes sense this year or not, but the Oregon FFA Foundation is in March, and I think it would be really cool for us to figure out how we might be able to be where the convention is and have some shared visits to the state FFA convention. It's in Redmond, and I think the following year is in Redmond too. That hasn't been decided, but it wouldn't have to be in March of this coming year if it didn't make sense for the group. I also, in case I have to jump before we finish, I left Carla some dates where I have a board meeting already scheduled for next year that I can't miss, but there's not too many of those.
And what year did we go to FFA? When we were in Redmond, that was not too long before COVID, was it?
I think we've always invited board members to participate in the convention, but we haven't held a board meeting there.
Okay. Any other input for Carla that we can do today? People can also, if you haven't thought about it or looked at your calendars, I would encourage you to do that and send whatever info you can to Carla to help her narrow down the dates. And if you have opinions about keeping the commitments to the places we had on the calendar before, or not, or if it doesn't matter to you, or anybody chime in on that right now if you have thoughts about it.
So one thing to think about, I know Marty Myers had really wanted to take the board to Tillamook We obviously have a new dairy farmer on the board from Tillamook, so that might still be a really great place to go to. The same, Grant Kinamara really wanted to take the board out to Ontario. We have another great new board member from the Ontario area, so also could be an interesting to still see that type of agriculture. It's been a while since we've been to either of those two places, so I would throw those two out as options for the board to think about.
I'd love to have you guys in Ontario. It'd be awesome.
Okay, I'm not hearing any objections to Tillamook and Ontario, so unless somebody speaks out, we'll start there at least, Carla.
And so why don't we send out maybe a doodle poll, Carla, to the board members so we could do some blocks of dates within kind of each quarter, and we can narrow down the exact dates if that works for all the board members.
And typically aren't we hasn't the board been traveling in when it's relatively decent weather? So that probably won't be too much of a concern for either of those locations, Tillamook or Ontario.
And I would suggest the Ontario location be about this time of year for this meeting next year. If we can get into onion harvest, I can get you into some packing sheds, see the whole scope versus just seeing the onions in the field. We can see the whole production. So
that's excellent. Thank you, Randy. Yeah, that was actually our plan, to be there right now at this meeting. So I think that would be great for that one. Hopefully we are meeting in person by that time. And then perhaps in the April to June block in Tillamook, usually, the later in the year, October to December, it could start getting a little harder to travel certain places. So maybe that one would be in the Salem, Portland metro area. And then we'll see about that January, March, if we were able to meet in person. Maybe that's one we could try and redo at Corvallis. But we'll play that one by ear, as well as this December meeting. If we're able to meet in person, we certainly will plan a meeting in person.
And would you like me to come back to see feasibility? I could work with Lisa Hanson, who's pretty close to FFA, on what might work maybe for the following year, whatever. Okay, thank you. Sorry, Madam Chairman.
No worries. Carla, is that good for now on that?
Yes, I'll put a doodle poll together and get that out to folks and narrow some dates down as to what might work best for everyone.
Okay, newsletter topics, I think, is our last. Oh, I missed one thing. On public comment, we got a letter with regard to the $150 million in natural disaster relief, which was Section 167 of House Bill 5006. And the letter requested support for small-scale producers and BIPOC producers who don't have access to federal aid. So that's state money. And I think they wanted the board, I don't have the public comment letter in front of me, but I don't know enough about that issue to know if that money has all been distributed and spoken for, if there's anything really for the board to do on that, but I didn't want to leave it hanging. So we probably don't have Lisa or Lauren anymore on the phone. Director Taylor, do you know about that money?
Yeah, so that was talked about as part of the disaster discussion. There was 150 million set aside. There are ongoing discussions around, again, I was kind of talking about that narrow focus that maybe isn't for crops unique to Oregon, that maybe existing federal disaster programs don't work for, or some of the disaster programs that will be coming and spending that will be coming still might not cover. And that's really kind of where that 150 pot of money comes into play, I think, statewide. And as I said, it's probably been spent 30 times over already for the scale of the needs from Klamath, from North Unit Irrigation District, from all the different producers who have had different impacts from natural disasters. And there are non-ag uses or non-agricultural sectors that are also have needs that are looking at that fund. But so I don't think it's been fully allocated, and that will be done at an e-board, which potentially could be October, which Mary Ann Cooper mentioned. But there's a lot, that's the pot of money everyone's kind of talking about.
And will there be public comment to e-board, or I don't, maybe Shantae knows something about this, perhaps, or other board members do.
So by the time you get to an e-board, this will be pretty fleshed out, an agreement on how those resources are going to be spent.
All right. Do any board members have any thoughts about whether or not it's necessary for the board to do anything in response to this public comment at this time? Okay. Hearing none. Yes, somebody just heard a voice. Director Taylor. Nope. Okay.
I was just gonna say I'm not aware about the e-board, but I can just say that group of producers with Earl Blumenauer's office, and did hear about some of the issues that some of the BIPOC producers were facing with some natural disasters and things like that. But I don't think it's necessary to do anything that the board has, anything to do with that public comment in this moment.
Chair Halleck, if I could, this is Lauren.
Yes.
Particularly around the e-board, like for ODA, we would have a specific request, and there's a long process to even get that teed up for a state agency. But for other e-board requests that we might be ancillary to or part of, we usually will provide information. I'll give you an example, the grasshopper situation and what's going on there. There's a lot of data. The best thing for the groups to do at this point, I believe, given that the e-board has that $150 million, and as Director Taylor said, it's probably already overprescribed, is to work with a legislative champion, preferably a member of the e-board, so that they can tee it up themselves and work with LFO to make a placeholder for that. That is really the fastest and most expedient way to get at least a discussion and a placeholder for that, is when e-board members or legislative champions that are maybe in the district or have direct needs with their constituents can bring that forward. That would be my short advice. And then if it does get teed up, there could be discussions at a future time about, does the board support the idea or whatever, that for once it's teed up and becomes a line item, I guess is the best way.
Yeah, and I would just add to this is, a coalition has sent a letter to the governor and the joint e-board leadership, as well as President Courtney and Speaker Kotek. And I have, I know the governor's office is aware of this. I have, flagged it for them. And so I think there are discussions ongoing right now. And I'm certainly happy to keep this kind of elevating this request to make to the governor's office and legislators to make sure they're aware of it in the discussions I'm in.
Okay, great. That's great. Thank you. So I think the last thing we have, Carla, are items for the newsletter subsequent to this board meeting. Certainly, I think we need to do some kind of summary of all of the tales of woe that we heard in terms of the effects of natural disaster, the weather, and everything that people have experienced. There's going to be a lot to listen to write that up, I guess, Carla, but it seems like that was probably the most important part of this meeting, at least in my view. What else do people think? maybe an approach, since we were supposed to have been at OSU and this kind of an OSU focused agenda, maybe there's some way to capture that in the newsletter so that we can highlight the OSU programs that we heard about, since we didn't get to be there and actually experience them, but maybe present it that way in the newsletter, if that works for everybody.
Yeah, this is Shantae. I like that idea because I do think that the cultivating change, I think it was, they had a great presentation, and also about, ag in the classroom. I would love to have that highlighted along with the natural disaster stuff that we heard and suicide prevention work.
Okay, and then of course there'll be a farewell letter from me, and Tyson's actually there in the background. So, and great 8 years, you guys. Sorry I didn't ever get to meet some of you, but maybe we'll crash a meeting sometime if you ever meet again in person. Okay, do we need to do anything else, Carla?
We have a short video that we can play to send you off on a farewell. So bear with me while I try to get that up and running here in a moment.
Fun. It's probably a really good idea.
There's no volume.
Alexis,
We can't hear it. Can everybody else hear it?
There it is.
Well, sorry the audio didn't work perfectly, but we can make sure you guys also get a copy of it and can hear all the glowing things that I said. But essentially, I just was saying thank you to Tyson and Stephanie. You both have been really a valuable part of this board in my tenure here, and I know even before I joined. I'm very sad you're going off. I'm sure you are going to appreciate some free time back. But we just really appreciate it, I know, as the board, as the department, and you'll both be greatly missed.
Thank you. You guys go forth, do good.
And can you send us all the video, please?
I will.
And I noticed that Pedro
Yes.
was sat next to each of you in those board meetings, which I found really pretty interesting.
Hi, Luisa, are you going to say something?
No, I just want to say I will have to go and visit Tyson someday. That's what I want. I want to see you again in person, both of you. Thank you.
Oh, well, we sure hope that can happen at one of the future meetings. Maybe we'll make a guest appearance.
That would be great.
If I had, if I had 30 seconds or 10, I just want to, I really struggle like with this Zoom meeting format that it makes me feel old because I just feel so disconnected. And I know that like my kids and that generation, like they thrive on things like this, and I really struggle with it. So to the new board members, I kind of apologize because I haven't really been as active since we've moved to this format because I just really struggle with it, and I really thrive on interaction and being around people and so I've really struggled, and I don't really feel like I've really contributed to the board since we've moved to this format as much as I would have liked to, kind of in my twilight meetings. So for that, I apologize to the new board members. I wish you all the best of luck. It's an awesome organization. It's a great board. You have a great director and leadership team there. And I really hope if y'all ever make it to Eastern Oregon, you look me up because, like, you know, mi casa, su casa, and there's never a shortage of alcoholic beverages on the north side of I-84 off the 210 exit. So it's a short drive, and I've got a lot of spare bedrooms, and I would love to meet, even though I haven't met several or many of you in person. I would absolutely appreciate and enjoy the opportunity to do so. So please look me up, and then to those of you that I have met, you know me well enough to know that you're welcome absolutely anytime. So adios.
Yes, and to our buddy Brian Harper, go forth, bang that gavel. Louisa, bang.
I thought she was referring to your marriage, and when she started that sentence, I got really uncomfortable.
Yes, congratulations, Brian. Maybe it's time to end these proceedings. But
Congratulations,
thank you
Brian.
all.
Thank you, Stephanie and Tyson. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.